So, due to copyright laws, I don't show anything besides the cover, so it is essentially me talking. So, if you want to play this video while you're doing chores, just listening, you wouldn't miss anything. Hello, welcome to the Squirrel Tale. In this video, I am going to be doing my first book review. It's something I would like to start doing. I have a fairly large collection of books on muzzleloader building, antique firearms, guns, things like that, and I figured going through and telling you what I like and dislike about them might be something that you're interested in. And if this is content you're interested in and want more of it, please smash that like button to let me know, and it also helps me out in the algorithm so more people can see my videos. So I'd appreciate that. But the book I'm talking about today is Weaponry and Illustrated History. The author was Chuck Willis, an association, and then the Berdan Museum, or Berman Museum. And this book came out first in 2006 and then was updated in 2008. And this was actually a Christmas gift for me when I was in a 7th grade, I believe. 2008. It was printed, so yeah, 2008 going to 2009. So, in middle school, I got this book. And as you can see by the condition of the cover in the book, that is not how it came, obviously. When I was in middle school and into high school, read that book a lot and spent a lot of evenings going through every page. I've probably, second only to the Bible, probably the book I've read the most. Was very interesting, and I had the interest before this book came out, but it probably strengthened my interest in antique firearms. Now, for a brief summary of it, essentially this book, it starts in the Stone Age and tells the story from holding a rock in a hand to your modern ARs and AK rifles, what soldiers are using today. It tells that story, so it goes through all the eras. The book is split up into 6 parts. Part 1 goes prehistoric, so stone weapons, about to shortly after the fall of Rome, the early medieval period. So, by far the biggest hunk of time. And then part 2 is middle part of the Middle Ages, up until gunpowder got introduced. So mainly part 2 is things during like your knights, your armored knights, your Renaissance period, right in between, that shortly after Rome fell and gunpowder was introduced. Part 3 goes over the weapons from the introduction of gunpowder up until Napoleon. Part 4 goes Napoleon to World War I. And Part 5 goes World War I in the aftermath. And then Part 6 is World War II to modern times. So, that's several thousand years of history it goes through. And those sections are then, each kind of 2-page area will have something. One will be like defensive weapons of this era, one will be naval weapons of this time period. You know, infantry rifles of World War I, infantry rifles of World War II. And it also goes into different countries, especially in the older ones, like what were, you know, especially in the United States, there's a huge emphasis on Western European, which it covers those well in there, but it also says, okay, what were they using in Asia, China, Africa, and that's pretty interesting. So I'm gonna start out with the bag. Now, I don't want to. I don't know how copyright works with stuff, so I don't really want to show too much on the inside. But I didn't see this book is. I mean, it's a thick book, but it's covering thousands of years, so it's a very general summary. Like, you're not getting, it's not very detail oriented. I mean, they do have some pretty neat, I mean, they have great pictures, that's probably but that's a positive. You're not getting a in-depth scope on any one particular thing. And that I would also, I think, led to is, and to me the biggest negative is, there's some things that are inaccurate or maybe written in a way that can confuse you. You know, and like I said, I read this a lot when I was 12, and there were some things that I realized later on, and after learning other sites, or yeah, when I was younger, I read this like 100 times. I realized, okay, that wasn't quite, I was misinformed slightly. I wouldn't say there's too much flat out misinformation, but things that are written in a way that could give you the wrong idea, mainly because of how vague they are. I mean, it was interesting going back through it, looking at this book. Like I said, I read it hundreds of times, literally probably several hundred times, almost the entire thing when I was in middle school. But then to go back and look at it now that I've been doing more research, actually collecting, I actually have some of the firearms in there. You know, seeing the information, like, and I'll read something like, you know, that might not be the best way to write it, but, and I guess that also could be the fact that how much it covers. You know, the author is definitely a jack of all trades to have an idea of all this stuff, so that makes sense. And kind of on the same lines, you know, with it being a big overview, like I said, it doesn't get into any detail on one particular things because, you know, it's talking, has a big emphasis on bladed weapons in this. I would say over half of it's probably swords and knives, which kind of makes sense because they were used for a good portion of history. I mean, firearms are, relatively speaking, on, you know, world history, a relatively new invention. I mean, they're about, you know, 1300s compared, you know, there's a couple thousand years before that, but, you know, and even in the later chapters they do, which is interesting, they do talk a lot about swords. And I'm not saying that's negative, but, like, if you're looking for a book to strictly talk about either guns or swords, this is probably not the book for you. My only other complaint, and this is a small one, is I don't know, like, with the 6 parts, I think they could have done a little better with how they divided them up. Instead of maybe eras of time maybe gone through, like I might have done, but I mean, I'm also not an author, would have done like the Bronze Age, or the Stone Age, or Bronze Age, the Steel Age, the muzzleloader flintlock age, the percussion era, flintlock era, early cartridge guns, later cartridge, something to that effect. And where this can get interesting is in part 5 or part 4, Napoleon to World War I. So you're talking there about 100-year period. And this one would be a hard one to cover because probably more changes to weapons happened in this 100-year period than any other period. But, so it, again, breaks it down to subsections. And then, so the one subsection is the automatic pistol, which occurred in that time period. It was by 1914, we had the 1911 pistol. We had Lugers, I think, by that. Yeah, we had 1908 Luger, P08. We would have the Luger and, the Mauser. Several early semi-automatic pistols were developed in that era. So they have that section, and then they have then they have another section after it in the book that covers like self-defense pistols, or self-defense weapons. And in there they have things like your Derringers, your pocket pistols, some small cap and ball revolvers, which, if you're just looking through, it's kind of confusing because you see the 1911 and wait, we're back to cap and ball, or back to, cap locks and muzzleloaders. Again, it's kind of a nitpick, but I remember one time I was looking for the picture, this was when I was younger, of a particular gun that was in that section. I remember looking for a while, but once I got to like 1911, I would quit looking and go back until I realized, it's actually after that point. There's a couple areas where it's like that. Again, I would definitely put that in the nitpicking category, but it is noteworthy. Now, that's the negatives. Now I'm going to talk about the positives. What I like about this book. And this is kind of, I said how it's a big overview. That is also a positive. Now, if you're getting into collecting, or you want to collect, I think it's a good idea. Like, if you're interested in weapons and firearms history, you're probably going to specialize in something, or maybe a handful of things. My base knowledge is muzzleloading firearms, and then also World War II firearms. Someone asked me a question about, like Asian firearms of the, 1870s. I'm not going to be able to give them a good answer on what they were using. Or if someone asks me about medieval crossbows, I'm not going to be able to give them a real good detailed answer. But I do think having at least a general understanding of all of world history, and if you're going to be into all of military and firearms history, is a useful thing to have. And this can provide you that general overall history. The other thing that I would say about it is it's an easy read. It is one book, you have reference books, and then you have, like, I don't know what the proper name was, but, like, books that are intended to be read start to finish. Some books, like, okay, the Machinist Handbook, that's a reference book. You're going to look something up if you're familiar with that. You're not going to sit down and read the Machinist Handbook start to finish. Or an encyclopedia, that would be probably the best example. You don't sit down and read an encyclopedia start to finish. This book, like say you want to read up on World War I firearms, kind of in the mood to read about that. Yeah, you can go look up that section and just read about World War I. But it is actually not a bad book if you want to sit down by the fireplace and read it from the first page. It's almost set up like a story. So yeah, you can easily read this book start to finish, and it is a very interesting story to do it. I think I did that once, and then other times it was, I'm kind of wanting to read about World War II books and would read that. And the other thing I really would give it credit is it has information. Yeah, it's also a lot of information, and it's also easy to read. And then that might come with a negative about it being a hard to, or a general information. That's, again, kind of a negative. It's also a positive. When I got this book, I would have been in middle school, so I would have been around 12, probably think 2008, I think I just would have turned 13. So I was just in my early teenage years, and I was never the greatest bookworm. I wasn't the kid who was sitting down reading big novels just for fun, but I wasn't a bad reader either, but I had no issue sitting down and reading this book and understanding it. So if there is someone younger in that early teenage years, this would be a great book for them, and it might inspire them to develop an interest in history in the hobby. The hobby of collecting antique firearms, building muzzleloaders, stuff like that is a great hobby to be in. Obviously, that's why I have the channel, trying to encourage people to get into it. So again, I think it's a great gift for someone younger to get a general understanding of.